multi-stakeholder approach to platform regulation in Brazil. My name is Henrique Faulhaber. I'm one of the board members of CGIBR, the Brazilian Internet Committee. First, I would like to thank the IGF organizers and everyone present today here and online. A special thanks to our speakers who will contribute to our debate. The CGIBR, the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, is composed with representatives from the government, corporate sector, the third sector, and the academic community, forming a unique Internet governance model that ensures effective societal participation. This open forum aims to present and discuss the consultation conducted by CGI and its systematization, which provides both a qualified and in-depth basis for regulating digital platforms. As you know, the regulation of digital platforms has gained global relevance in recent years, with various countries approving or debating regulatory models. However, due to their complexity and scope, reaching consensus has proven difficult, particularly in developing countries like Brazil. Digital platforms are extremely diverse in size, service, business, in models and impacts, both positive and negative. While platforms play important roles such as connecting business and users, they also pose significant risks, both presumed and proven, that affect markets, economies, human rights, democracy, public health, and many other areas. Concerns are especially focused on large platforms that provide indispensable services such as search engines and social networks. The complexity and scope of platform activities, coupled with the diverse interests involved, make it challenging to agree on an ideal regulatory model. In this context of ongoing disputes and disagreements, ensuring broad societal participation to achieve a multi-stakeholder consensus is utmost important. With this in mind, CGIBR decided to conduct an open consultation in the regulation of digital platforms in Brazil. This consultation is the result of over 2 years of work by CGIBR, Platform Regulation Work Group, this group here, which I coordinate. It has engaged with society through seminars, workshops, and studies, and we launched and systematized through 2023. This consultation that we present today address platform definitions and classification, maps the risks posed by platform activities, explores regulatory measures to mitigate these risks, and outlines the actors and mechanisms necessary for implementation regulation. We hope that CGIBR's historical role in fostering multi-stakeholder dialogue and consensus building on Internet-related issues will contribute to developing a consensual regulatory framework for platform regulation in Brazil. Today, our open forum features 6 speakers. First, we have Juliano Capi and Juliana Oms from the CGIBR Secretariat. After that, you have Marcelo Formazin, a colleague of mine, representing the academic and technical sector. After that, Bia Barbosa, also a CGIBR board member, representing civil society. After that, Eugênio Garcia from Brazil, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who holds a permanent invite position on our board. And at the end, Mônica Guise from Meta, represent the private sector on those discussions. This CGIBR advisory team will briefly present the structure and main results of the consultation. This will be followed by contribution from the other speakers here, from the four sectors that participate in the building the consultation. We are also very happy to launch here the publication of the systematization of the consultation here at the IGF. We provide some copies to you if you want to know more deeply the details of the consultation by itself. So, Juliano will start. Juliano and Juliana will start with a summary of the consultation, please.
Thank you very much, Henrique. Well, I'd like to start speaking of an important aspect of every consultation, which is the social participation. A consultation only fulfills itself if society really participates in its proposition. Despite you may produce good questions and good structures and a good dynamic for the consultation, if the social participation doesn't happen, consultation fails. Then I'd like to highlight that this consultation had really high rates of social participation. It received nearly 1,400 inputs from 140 organizations from the four sectors that comprises the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, the CGI.br, the government sector, third sector, business sector, and the scientific and technical community. The third sector and the scientific and technical community send most of the inputs, with 41% and 39.5% of the total, respectively. The business sector accounted for 15% of the inputs, and the government sector only 4%, as it was expected. It's worth mentioning about the broad diversity of perspectives. Different positions arose not only between the different sectors, but also inside all represented sectors, what provided the consultation a representative map of the understanding of digital platform regulation challenges in Brazil in 2023. Finally, it's relevant to mention the quality of inputs. Organization smear to produce good and quality contributions for the consultation. Well, CGI.br aimed at providing a meaningful contribution to the challenge of producing a piece of regulation for digital platforms in Brazil. So it was defined three essential elements to the task. The first element was the definition of the regulated entity. The second element was to have a good definition of the problems that should be addressed. For that, we use the first stage of a risk-based regulation model, which is to map risks the regulated entity activities poses to society. The third element was to establish a governance model to implement the regulation. Then we defined three main questions, one for each axis of the consultation structure. First, who to regulate, define the regulated entity. Second, what to regulate, to define the problems we'd like to address. And finally, how to regulate, to define a governance model to implement this challenging regulation. So the consultation was structured into these three axes. In Axis 1, we presented a qualitative summary of the inputs received on who to regulate in response to questions about the object and scope of regulation, including different definitions, typologies, and fields of activities of digital platforms. In Chapter 2, the Chapter 2 summarizes the inputs on what to regulate, involving questions about the risks arising from digital platforms activities and possible mitigation measures. The risks were organized into four main groups. First, risks related to threats to competition, economic, and data concentration. Second, risks related to threats to digital sovereignty, technological development, and innovation. Third, risks related to threats to decent work. And the last one, but not least important, risks related to threats to democracy and human rights. In the Chapter 3, presented a quantitative and qualitative synthesis of the inputs on how to regulate digital platforms and the possible institutional arrangements to regulate them, considering both state regulation models and different approaches to self-regulation. Next, please.
Thank you, Juliano and Henrique. I'll talk a little bit about the first axis. That the inputs were about the scope of the regulation. So they were debating about definitions of platform regulation and also which platforms to regulate. We divided these inputs in three categories. The first was definition, and inside this, these also were divided in three categories. The first is infrastructure. The participants mentioned that platforms need a technological infrastructure and usually use a variety of terminologies such as digital, electronic, and internet. The second characteristic is actors and their relationship on the platforms. In this part, the participants highlighted that platforms are characterized by connecting groups and producing benefits to each group participants in the platform, and on network effects and also highlighting the market. Lastly, also some characteristics were pointed out by the participants as shared or essential characteristics to define platforms, like data-intensive use, the use of artificial intelligence technologies, and network effects. These characteristics were also highlighted later in the risks mapping as something that would intensify the risks. We also analyzed platform typologies, as you can see, examples in the and these typologies that arise in the contributions may be used to determine the scope of possible regulatory initiatives or to divide them into sector regulation, as such a regulation to public platforms or to food platforms, and it goes on. Lastly, the third part of this axis 1 is a discussion about asymmetry regulation, and there was a broad consensus in the consultation that regulation must be asymmetric, except with representations of large platforms associations. But in some this means that that most people think that some actors in the digital ecosystem should be objects of specific regulatory provisions. There was also some agreement that no criteria should be used individually. The criteria you can see here, like market share, core services, number of users, and they should not be used individually but used in combination. And usually gatekeeper was seen as encompassing all these other criteria. Sorry. What? Thank you. Sorry. This was for axis 1. In axis 2, that is what to the f- Tá ruim, né? Hi, are you listening? Okay. In the inputs on access to what to regulate, the first group of risks presented in there is about risks and measures associated with the abuse of market power and economic concentration. This was one of the topics that received most attention from the participants, and it's interesting to notice that there was a clear difference in the approach of two different sectors, two different groups, sorry. First, part of the private sector, particularly those associations representing digital platforms, argued that digital platforms are characterized by fast innovation, intense competition, constant change. So in that sense, they didn't see those risks as relevant because they think the Brazil has a robust competition system, defense system, so it wouldn't be necessary to make any changes. On the other hand, there was a strong consensus among the third sector, the government sector, and the scientific and technological community, and also some part of the private sector, such as media association, internet providers, on the relevance of the risks mapped. This group mentioned platform characteristics such as network externalities and anti-competitive strategies such as self-preferencing or aggressive acquisitions that contribute to establishing monopoly power and its abuse. It was also highlighted an interesting dynamic between those risks that data processing and infrastructure concentration is seen as a risk that contributes to another risk that is market concentration and economic power abuse. These dynamics builds a lock-in effect and to big platforms and a winner takes all dynamic, resulting in the detriment of product and server quality innovation and alternative models in the vision of this group of actors. Não, mudar o slide. Considering all these mapped risks, the participants debated a myriad of measures to mitigate these risks. And we also see again this same division between these two groups. In part, the groups connected to associations of digital platforms, they think that the the competition system is enough to combat abuses, and that is usually provisions that function ex ante, or that is, they function in, after, no, ex post, sorry. They function after the issue happened. So they don't need any don't see any need for change. However, the other group that I mentioned see the need for new regulatory measures from an economic and competition perspective. And a lot of measures that you can see in the slide were discussed. Especially, I would like to highlight that data interoperability was a big consensus in the consultation, even between platforms, but there was divergence on how this would be implemented. Also, on the other hand, policies to promote alternative models like policies to innovation and alternative to those large platforms such as not-for-profit or local models were highlighted only by participants from the third sector and the scientific and technological community. So there was not the same division that before.
Considering the human right, no, hold on. Oops. Right. The human rights structure, and the vast majority of inputs mention threats to freedom of expression, access to reliable information, cultural diversity, and democracy, expressed by several challenging issues, such as disinformation, the rise of extremism, hate speech, and incitement of violence. Risks to quality journalism were also highlighted. There was a consensus that fighting infodemics involves strengthening journalism, an important mechanism to ensure the citizen access to information. Regarding democracy and the electoral process, there was a broad consensus on the relevance of digital platforms in the construction of public debate. The powerful influence of digital social media on public debate poses risks, domination of public discourse. Relative to children and adolescents, several inputs address the vulnerability of this group, of this age group, to digital platforms' business models, emphasizing the absolute priority of protecting their rights. From the point of view of counterfeiting measure, there were three issues that could be highlighted. Restrictions on data collection and profiling, considering principles and specific contexts. For example, child use of digital platforms. Restriction on programmatic advertising. Transparency measures and intermediary liability based on the principle of systemic risks of the platform activities. Finally, the last axis on governance. We analyzed that the inputs suggested that approaches are essentially defined by two conceptual vectors. The first vector discusses whether states or private sector should have a protagonist role, while the second consider whether the locus of decision-making should be concentrated in a single institution or decentralized across several entities and actors. Strict self-regulation, for instance, would have little or no state protagonism and a decentralized decision-making locus, as it would be dispersed across digital platforms. In contrast, in regulated self-regulation, the locus of decision-making would be concentrated in a single private self-regulatory entity, and the state would have little protagonism. I guess those are the quick highlight of the main results of the consultation, and I give back the floor for Henrique Faulhaber.
Thank you, Juliana and Juliana. After this summary of our consultation, I now give the floor to our speakers representing different sectors. Each of you have 8 minutes to share your comments on the consultation process and results. As well, you're free to make any statement about our current issues related to digital platforms in Brazil. We did this consultation last year, and as you know, 1 year from now, there are several situations and events regarding platform regulation that should be commented here. So you are free to do that as you will. So you start with Marcelo Formazin, our board member from the academic and scientific community. Marcelo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Henrique. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcelo Fornazin. I'm in the board of members at the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, the CGE.br, representing the scientific community. And I'm also a researcher at the National School of Public Health of the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, Fiocruz. I'm here replacing our colleague, Rafael Evangelista, who could not join us today due to visa issues while traveling from São Paulo to Riyadh. And I'd like to thank for the organizers for the opportunity to speak in this session. I congratulate the working group at CGI and the CGI staff for this relevant outcome you presented here. Is very important contribution for the discussion on platforms in Brazil and worldwide. And just to point some comments here, beyond this amazing study on platform regulation, the Brazilian CGI also conducted other studies on digital platforms. One focus on the role of platforms in education, analyzing the growing presence of platforms in public education systems and other countries. And another study explores the fair remuneration of journalists by platforms. You can access this information at the website cgi.br. Today I will focus on my comments will make a parallel between platform regulations and the regulation of digital health that I'm studying and researching at Fiocruz, which our study on digital health examines the implications of digital technologies for health, especially the platformization of health. Fiocruz is a Brazilian public health institution dedicated to advancing knowledge and technologies to support the Brazilian health system, now as Sistema Único de Saúde, or SUS, we call, while improving the population's health and the quality of life. This is the mission of Fiocruz. Fiocruz sees digital health technology as essential tools for achieving the sustainable development goals. My research is supported by the Fiocruz Office for the 23rd Agenda, which aims to align Fiocruz and the Brazilian SUS with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Just a brief on digital health and how it relates to platforms. When you think about digitalization in health or digital health, we see that this field brought significant changes to health systems worldwide, especially Brazilian public and universal health systems, the SUS. But what this means in digital health in practice? It includes telehealth consultations, which allow patients to connect with professionals remotely and enable professionals to consult their other specialists, professionals, wearable devices, and self-monitoring technologies, which generate vast amount of personal data in new formats. Integration and analysis of health data, creating opportunities for epidemiologic surveillance, disease prevention, health promotion, and improved healthcare. Digitalization in health is not entirely new. It began in the 1960s and has evolved over the decades. However, the past 10 years have seen a rapid growth in internet-mediated healthcare and data usage, transforming how healthcare is delivered. Like other sectors, healthcare is undergoing significant changes due to the rise of platforms, a trend we call platformization of health. While these advancements offer opportunities to expand the healthcare services, they also bring critical risks that need to careful attention. It's worth to mention that the economic effects of digital health were not extensively studied yet. And this study from TGI on digital platforms regulation is relevant for other sectors such as healthcare. A brief on the Brazilian health system, or SUS. We developed the Brazilian SUS in the 80s. We today have more than 30 years of the public health system in Brazil, and it's based that health, the comprehensive principle of health, that recognizes health is determined by social conditions like food, housing, education, income, environment, work, transportation, and the access to healthcare. So healthcare is linked to every other aspect of our life. And the SUS has some key principles. We can mention universality, equity, integrality, decentering, management, and social participation. And we can see that in Brazil, the healthcare responsibilities are shared. The SUS is managed by 3 levels of government: municipal, state, and national, and include participations from government officials, healthcare workers, and citizens through health councils and conferences. This shared governance reinforces the deliberative democracy in healthcare in Brazil. Brazil has also a private healthcare market organized as an insurance market. And today, 25% of Brazilians, 50 million people in average, use private insurance, but often rely on SUS for vaccinations, high-cost treatments, epidemiological surveillance, and public health campaigns. Meanwhile, 75% of the Brazilian population depend exclusively on SUS, or unfortunately faces irregular access to healthcare through philanthropic provision. So we have many problems for delivering healthcare in Brazil. And 5 years ago, Brazil launched a new digital health strategy aligned with the World Health Organization Global Strategy on Digital Health. By leveraging digital technology and data analytics, this initiative aims to transform the Brazilian healthcare system and improve health outcomes for the population. As part of this strategy, digital health strategy, key programs have been developed to enhance healthcare service through technology and data. The Connect SUS program focuses on digitizing healthcare process, improving communication, and enhancing coordination among the healthcare providers. Informatics in primary care supports primary care providers by offering digital tools and resources to improve patient care and management at local level. And the National Health Data Network centralizes and standardizes personal health data, potentially enabling better decision-making and data interoperability. Finally, the digital health strategy promotes mobile applications to provide citizens with easier access to healthcare services and information. This will understand that's going to the direction of platformization of healthcare. And while digital tools bring potential benefits, we must ask some questions. Who owns the infrastructure and data? And who truly benefits from these changes? In our study at Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, we examined the Brazilian digital health strategy using platform studies approach to address these questions. We identified that three dynamics are driving the platformization of digital health in Brazil. The first one is data concentration. Health data is increasingly addressed as a commodity, often concentrated in the hand of a few entities. The second one is the privatization of public infrastructure. Public health data infrastructure is increasingly managed by private platforms. The third one is the shift as the user as a consumer. Citizens are shifting from active participants in public health governance to consumers of healthcare services. These dynamics risks fragment healthcare practices and undermine the integrity of healthcare system. Moreover, offering digital services in a country with unequal internet access could create barriers to access universal health system. Our research also highlights parallels between Brazil and the other countries, such as United Kingdom and Denmark, where public health systems are influenced by private interests. In Brazil, the public health data today is stored on Amazon Web Services, without a clear evidence of compliance with national data protection law. Similarly, in the UK, the company Palantir, known for its links to intelligence service, manages NHS data, raising concerns about how this data is being used. Social participation is also a key principle of the Brazilian healthcare systems, designed to involve the population in policy-making process related to healthcare service. This principle highlights the importance of community engagement and empowerment in promoting health and ensuring that services meet the needs of the population. In recent years, discussion about digital health in Brazil have primarily taken place in two spaces. One is the Manager Committee on Digital Health, currently limited to government officials' representations. And the second one is the Committee of Information Standards in Private Health, which included private health insurance companies and healthcare providers, unions, with no participations of users. With the digitalization of services and prominence of these technocratic forums we may see that participation has shifted. Instead of fostering knowledge, collective decision-making, users are increasingly treated as consumers who evaluate and engage in digital health service, limiting opportunities for democratic governance. Social movements in Brazil have pushed back against this trend. For instance, the Coalizão Direitos na Rede has campaigned for stronger safeguards on personal data protection and against risks of associated with data sharing. In the last year, civil society organizations proposed a free conference on information and digital health, presenting proposals for the National Health Conference that happened in the last July. And this year, under the pressure of social movements, the National Health Council established a technical chamber on digital health. This new space bringing together government, academia, workers, and the user associations to discuss and shape digital health policies. This evolution highlights the value of multi-stakeholder approaches in platform regulation and digital health governance. Diverse perspectives from government, academia, civil society, and public health works are essential for ensuring transparency, accountability, and the protection of citizen rights. So finishing, thank you for your attention, and be happy to discuss with you about the regulation of platforms.
Thank you, Marcelo, for the overview of digital health systems in Brazil. We believe that our work on digital platform regulation should be applied in some respects to that particular field. So next, you will have Eugenio Garcia from the Foreign Affairs Minister, that you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello. Hello. Thank you so much, and congratulations for this event, and thank you for the CGI Brazil Internet Steering Committee for organizing this session. I hope my microphone works to the very end. This is a consultation that was held, and as a multi-stakeholder exercise, you see let's go back and start all over again. Now, thank you so much for this invitation, and congratulations on this event. And the CGI, Brazil's Internet Steering Committee, thank you for organizing this session. By the way, we have hard copies available of the book on the consultations here on the table. If you want to take it, one of them, or also download the PDF or the electronic version of the book. It's also available. And this is, as I said in the beginning, a very important exercise in terms of multi-stakeholderism, that we take a multi-stakeholder model very seriously. And by the way, you might be also interested to note that we have the São Paulo multi-stakeholder guidelines adopted early this year in São Paulo during the Net Mundial Plus 10. I think all the IGF participants interested in the GDC implementation and also the WISIS Plus 20 review process would be interested in having a look. If you are not familiar with the São Paulo multi-stakeholder guidelines, they are also available, and you can also access the CGI's websites for more information on that as a footnote, but very important in terms of IGF debates. And we have been busy in Brazil this year with the G20, as you know, including the working group on the digital economy, where some issues were discussed, including universal and meaningful connectivity, electronic e-government, and also digital public infrastructure and artificial intelligence, with an approach that is development oriented, seeking to reduce inequalities. And I mentioned the G20 because we introduced in this working group on the digital economy the topic of information integrity, which is extremely important as we are discussing digital platforms. And this was the first time the G20 address the issue, information integrity, including misinformation, disinformation, fake news, everything in between. And we reached a consensus within the G20, and it was adopted by the end of during the ministerial meeting, concluding the work of the digital economy working group. And this is something that we also feel that is not only important topic to discuss, but also if you see during these consultations, there is a topic it is related to that, which I'd like to highlight. It's that digital sovereignty. And if you take the chapter 3 of Access 2 of the book, you see there is a chapter on risks related to threats to digital sovereignty, technological development, and innovation. So everything is related, not only information integrity, but also regulation of digital platforms and digital sovereignty. It's not there is no consensual definition of a digital sovereignty. And it's clear that in the different contributions from academia, civil society, the private sector, and the other stakeholders, this is clear in the consultation and the outcome. But this is a very rich debate that I invite you to have a look at. This chapter 3 of Access 2. And for example, one possible definition, but not the only one, was submitted during the consultations, defining digital sovereignty as the capacity to exercise power and control over digital infrastructure and data, and implies understanding the effects, both positive and negative, of each technological choice. Of course, there are many other definitions that were submitted or suggested during the consultation. And in my view, digital sovereignty is related to the rights of self-determination and control over your own digital future. But this is my personal view. So as a contribution to these debates, in this case, it doesn't mean digital sovereignty closing your borders or any sort of isolation from international networks or global supply chains. For example, data centers. Let's suppose a data center run by a national government with control over the national data or the data of the citizens of this country. Sometimes in Brazil, we call it sovereign cloud. In this case, you can also, even you can buy hardware from a foreign company, but only you have access to the data within the geographical boundaries of your national territory or jurisdiction. So that in terms of, it's also related to data sovereignty. Even if you talk about software, it should reflect your local needs and linguistic and cultural background. And this is a discussion that is interesting to, maybe we can go deeper, but talking about digital platforms, which is the main topic of this session, having our digital future controlled by a few tech companies doesn't look like the best scenario to me. And of course, there is a discussion on concentration of power. That's something that needs to be tackled, and in particular for the developing countries that lack resources, expertise, or the means to be on an equal footing with global private companies. And having said that, Brazil has become one of the most prominent countries leading the defense of democracy and the rule of law from attacks against democratic institutions. You remember not so long ago a temporary ban on the X platform in Brazil due to the lack of compliance with court decisions on suspicious or fake profiles on the X platform, inappropriate content, and in particular, the absence of a legal representative of the foreign company in Brazil. And this was not a question of free speech, but self-defense of democracy and Brazilian institutions under attack by politically motivated actors. Freedom of speech is guaranteed by the Brazilian Constitution. When we have a decision by the Brazilian Federal Supreme Court, it was pretty clear that the lack of compliance was undisputed. But when you hear a very famous CEO and billionaire, they will refrain from saying his name, but let's call him Mr. X. a very rich and powerful businessman, mocking Brazilian institutions, openly defying, saying, I will not comply with Brazilian legislation. Frankly, this, to my view, this is unacceptable. And for Brazil, as a democratic state, it was a matter, again, of defending the rule of law against attacks from a foreign private company. Basically, the problem could be summarized in one simple sentence. Brazilian law should be respected. That's all. And just for those who that wish to go deeper in this discussion, you can have a look at the Marco Civil, the Internet Civil Framework. It is a very famous contribution by in Brazil, the Marco Civil. That you see Article 11 says clearly, in any operation involving the collection, storage, safekeeping and processing of records, personal data, or communications by internet connection application providers, in which at least one of these acts occurs within the national territory. And that's the point, that's important. Brazilian legislation, the rights to privacy, protection of personal data, and confidentiality of private communications and records must be complied with. So basically, the Marco Civil, the Internet Civil Framework, it says that Brazilian law should be respected. That's all. And also civil codes, or Código Civil, for those Portuguese-speaking friends here, Article 1137, a foreign company authorized to operate should be subject to Brazilian laws and courts with regard to acts or operations carried out in Brazil. And there is more. Article 1138, a foreign company authorized to operate is required to have a permanent representative in Brazil with powers to resolve any issues and receive legal summons on behalf of the company. So maybe to conclude, as I said, freedom of speech is guaranteed by the Brazilian Constitution. And happily, that this problem was resolved in terms of compliance. The company, in this case, the X platform, decide to pay the fines and then appoint a legal representative in Brazil, and finally comply with the court decisions by the Brazilian Federal Supreme Court. Meanwhile, other foreign companies and digital platforms had no problem at all with the judiciary, and they have continued their operations normally in Brazil. Like, for example, Meta is doing great in Brazil. You know that Brazilians love WhatsApp. They have Facebook. They are all operating normally, to have no problems at all. So this is to say that this was very particular and a very specific case because it's relevant for the discussion on digital platform regulation, and a very famous, let's say, CEO that is well known everywhere. And then this was the result of the problem that we had to deal with. And I'm not going to repeat myself, but anyway, not only Brazilian law should be respected, but also that's almost the creating an obligation of self-defense, of democracy, and the rule of law. And this is something that, in terms of lessons learned, I think it's relevant for us to discuss and to see how we can avoid, or perhaps try to see if such problems don't happen again. I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eugenio, for your comments on very recent situation that we had in Brazil. In fact, these geopolitical issues regarding action of digital platforms should be discussed deeply, and in fact, it's part of the whole chart of our platform regulation working group. So I will follow to Bia Barbosa. She's also a board member of CGIBR, represents civil society. Please, Bia, you have your 8 minutes to give your give your talk. Thank you.
No. Yes? Yeah. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. My name, as Henrique mentioned, is Bia Barbosa. I'm a member of the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, one of the civil society representatives of our CGI.br and member of GIRACOM, Right to Communication and Democracy, a Brazilian NGO that struggles for freedom of expression and communication rights in Brazil. So I would like to offer some thoughts on how the results of our public consultation can contribute to ongoing legislative process in our country and in other as well, of course, considering the current disputes surrounding the regulation of platforms. Firstly, I think that it's important to say that from the perspective of the civil society, regulating digital platforms, especially social media and search engines, is an urgent task on democratic and human rights agenda in the digital age. It's a way of ensuring balance in this market, respect for the digital ecosystem, and establishing a regulatory framework that addresses a problem caused by the externalities of the way companies' business models work. We are talking about an economic sector that, like any other else, must be regulated. And we are talking about sovereignty, not from the perspective of states closing down the internet or fragmenting the internet, but in the sense that these are global companies that need to respect democratic legislation adopted by states. In democratic nations, it's only possible to move toward a digital environment based on human rights, where the exercise of freedom of expression exists and is guaranteed in balance with other fundamental rights if states take the decision to regulate platforms. Regulate not through judicial decisions, which are legitimate and can exist, but through a regulatory framework debated in the parliament, involving all the stakeholders, and this is not even happening jointly in our country. I'd like to mention a first legislative initiative under discussion in Brazil, which may consider the results of the public consultation, but which is in large part has already reflected its concerns and deals with the regulation of social media in relation to transparency and due process in the moderation of harmful and illicit content. The bill 2630, which has been debated since 2020 in Brazil, has been the subject of dozens of hearings and hundreds of contributions from experts in the field. It expands the possibility of holding social media liable, establishes users' rights to guarantee freedom of expression, establishes sanctions, and create a participatory regulatory institution for monitoring and applying the sanctions in the administrative sphere. Unfortunately, the bill's approval has been blocked by resistance from the far-right political parties, which claims that the law would violate absolute freedom of expression on social media, and also by pressure from platforms that are against the text. We hope, however, that with the new president of the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies next year, the text can be discussed again. Another initiative underway in the Brazilian Parliament, which would draw heavily on our public consultation, is Bill 2768 of 2022, which proposes economic regulation of platforms inspired by the European Digital Markets Act, but with a much less detailed text based on antitrust and the defense of competition. According to the parliamentary proposing the initiative, it would not be appropriate to put an ex-ante straitjacket on economic agents, which a series of absolute prohibitions. And then the bill is focused on mitigating the essential access control of digital platforms. The bill establishes that they will be considered holders of essential access control power when they earn annual operating revenue equal to or greater than $13 million from services offered to the Brazilian public. And among the obligation of these companies, which access control power would be transparency and provision of information to the National Telecommunications Agency on the provision of their services, isonomic and non-discriminatory treatment when offering services to professional users and end users, proper use of the data collected in the course of its activities, and not refusing to provide access to digital platforms to professional users. The National Telecommunications Agency could impose measures to mitigate any abuse of economic power, including those related to data portability and interoperability. From the perspective of civil society, the project is weak and makes little progress in relation to existing demands to tackle the economic power of big techs. In this regard, we find much more interesting an initiative launched in last October by the Ministry of Economics or Finance in Brazil, which presented recommendations for regulatory improvements in the Brazilian antitrust system with regard to digital platforms. Inspired by the path adopted by England, Japan, and above all Germany, through a robust analysis of the economic and competition aspect of digital platforms, the ministry concluded that competition policies needed to be updated to keep up with the dynamics and characteristics of digital platforms. The aim of the new regulation would be to promote contestability in markets prone to concentration, ensure governance parameters and management of network effect in the absence of competitive pressure, ensure freedom of choice for users of digital platforms, and promote transparency in digital markets. The way forward would be to improve the application of the competition laws enforcing in Brazil, better investigating competitive dynamics, and defining specific obligations for problems identified in each case, but also through a legislative project to provide the Administrative Council for Economic Defense with more effective ex-ante tools to designate economic agents of systemic relevance. The Rights on the Network Coalition, for example, which brings together more than 50 civil society organizations, believes that economic regulation is a unique opportunity to deal with the negative externalities of the digital platforms' business models, and that the transparency obligations set out in the recommendations must guarantee genuine public scrutiny by commercial and users of the business models imposed by digital platforms. Given the symmetry and dependency between these agencies, transparency obligation must be geared towards the collective interest and those affected by the policies and governance, which in many cases represent abuses on the rights to privacy and data protection and freedom of expression. A draft bill is being discussed by the federal government of Brazil and will probably be in 2025. In short, these are just three examples of three processes that release to different axes addressed in our public consultation. There are others, such data protection, protection of children's rights in the online environment, labor regulation on platforms that are being debated in Brazil and in which the Internet Steering Committee intends to contribute. This is precisely why the results of the consultation have been presented to congressmen and women and members of the government at various meetings held by our team in Brasilia. From civil society, we reinforce the importance of moving forward in the construction of regulation for digital platforms and their centrality in maintaining democracy. This is a fundamental step towards guaranteeing a digital ecosystem that is reliable and attentive to the integrity of information in a context of extreme digitalization, including of our democratic process. I am available for any other further questions, and thank you very much for the exchange and the debate.
Thank you, Bia, from the input from the civil society on those issues. You bring several current discussions on economic regulation of digital platforms, and also these commands on the process stopped on the discussion of Bill 2630. Now you will have Monica from Meta giving the input from the private sector. Meta was participating as well as association from private sector on the construction of this consultation, and we are very glad to have you, Monica. Thank you.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Yes, thank you. Thank you, Henrique, very much for the invitation. Juliana as well. It's a pleasure for me to be here this afternoon, although for me it's still morning because I haven't had lunch yet. So I would, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Monica Guisi. I'm head of public policy for Meta in Brazil. We did participate in this specific consultation that was conducted by the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, and we would like to congratulate CGI on conducting such thorough work, especially when delivering the results. We did not collaborate individually as Meta, but rather through our trade associations. I have just a few remarks. I know that we are a little bit short on time, so I'm going to try to make them as brief as possible. CGI's consultation was mainly structured around the risks of how digital platforms operate, and then proposing regulation that would be addressed to those specific risks raised. So my contribution here today is for us not to lose sight of the contributions as well that the digital platforms that do operate in this space actually have to offer to the Brazilian economy. I personally feel that when we're focused on risks and then proposed regulations, we sometimes lose sight of the economic, the social, the empowerment benefits that platforms actually have and have been having for many years now to the public in general, specifically their users. I can talk of opportunity for businesses. We have seen so many, especially small and medium, but I love the examples that we can bring from small business using our specific platforms to thrive in times, and especially in countries and in economies that do not allow certain groups of people to be in the formal economy. I have been interacting with so many women in Brazil who have their businesses thriving because they're using our platforms. And you know, that's just to speak on the business side. In terms of creating opportunities for people, I would love to raise the speech aspect of how having different means to communicate with the general public, of how important having these platforms provide their services is. Very coincidentally, this morning, I had a meeting with a former government member in Tunisia. He was responsible for implementing the transition to Tunisia as a democracy, from dictatorship to democracy. And that person was very, very, what's the word in English? I'm so tired that I'm forgetting already. So it's only day 3. enthusiastic in saying how much of an important role Facebook played in the revolution that took place in Tunisia. And how, if it hadn't been for Facebook being present at that specific moment, the information wouldn't have gotten to people, and the revolution probably would have had a very different face than it does nowadays. So when the CGI's consultation raises risks to democracy, I feel that it's important for us not to lose sight of how important it is for us to keep and maintain and strengthen certain safeguards that the Brazilian law actually has in place, and to hold those for the near future. We're currently in Brazil facing a situation in which we're seeing the Supreme Court rule on a very important article of our Marco Civil, which is Article 19. We are risking the Supreme Court to declare that article unconstitutional, meaning that we would be throwing away, I wouldn't say only 10 years, not just 1 decade from Marco Civil being adopted, but the many years that come before Marco Civil, in which civil society, industry, the academics, and international organizations helped us build a very robust conversation around the importance of how we define liability for internet companies in this age. I'm very, very concerned about the path that we might be taking moving forward. From a company perspective, if we were to remove speech in a way that we're seeing the first opinions that the Supreme Court of Justices are delivering, we would pretty much be removing them. Okay, yeah, back. We would pretty much be removing everything that resembles any risks to the business, especially when we're talking about countries in which we have a large user base, such as Brazil. The risks would definitely outweigh the economic opportunities. So I feel it's extremely important for us not to lose sight of these types of discussions and not to take the current laws that we have in place for granted. They are constantly on the risk, as we're seeing in Brazil right now. I feel that CGI's consultation, especially when it comes to the axis of defending democracy, does a pretty good job at highlighting the importance of defenses such as this one. Also, coincidentally, Professor Marcel Leonardi this morning published a very, very interesting article around this specific topic on Estadão. I would suggest my Brazilian colleagues who speak Portuguese to look it up. And it's very interesting because he raised 100 lawsuits that have taken place over the last couple of years, in which individuals went to the courts in order to have their contents either restored or removed, but mostly removed. And it's a very interesting analysis of how even the courts diverge in terms of what is an offense, where violations exactly are. So to transfer all of that power to private companies in order to decide what should and should not be spoken on the internet in Brazil seems to me disproportionate. And I can guarantee that digital platforms do not want this type of power in their hands, especially as we're business oriented. And at the end of the day, the civil liability would undermine the economic benefits very much potentially. So we would be removing so much speech. And I would hate to see the Facebook that has helped Tunisia get out of non-democratic state become a place where we will only be looking at recipes and cute pictures of cats and dogs, no matter how much I love looking at cute pictures of dogs more than so. I'll stop here and let the discussion continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica, for your input on the positive side of the use of technology, digital platform also, because of course it's a vector of growth and economic expansion. So we can't just talk about the negative side. Thank you also for bringing the discussion about the current discussion on Supreme Court. Bia has already mentioned that the block of discussion on Congress on Bill 2630 leave to the Supreme Court that is discussing today. Today you have the third vote on that issue, and it's concerned. Everybody's concerned about to change Marco Civil da Internet Bill of Rights in Brazil. That's it's a landmark on the internet regulation and right for the users being modified by the Supreme Court. That's not part of their job to do. And we are, at the moment, we are in fact having votes on making Article 19 unconstitutional. Probably today, I expect that Minister Barroso is bringing a more balanced vote, bringing the self-regulation with regulation approach that we believe that is more aligned with the multisectorial governance that we defend in Brazil, with participation of our stakeholders and giving the moderation in hands of the companies, but under certain conditions. So I believe this discussion, as you know, we are in the middle of the road on that discussion, and believe this kind of session here is good to us to discuss Brazilian issues, but also to let know our colleagues here in IGF from other countries how this discussion is being held in Brazil. So you have some time for questions and also for comments from the speakers. I don't know if there are questions from the audience or online. There's no online question. If someone has put a question here on the room, the mic will be available. If not, I will provide to the speakers some time to make your final comments, since we discussed not just the process of the consultation, but the results that put on the table, and some very important comments on the actual situation of these issues on Brazil. From the side of the group that will coordinate on platform regulation, we are, in this year, we have scheduling a seminar in Brazil on the second quarter, bringing back some issues that are more mature now, mainly about economic regulation and also discussion on issues related again to the social media moderation, this kind of thing that now is discussed on Supreme Court. And we also recognizing that most of discussions regarding platform regulation is now on the arena through the AI bill, AI laws being discussed in Brazil. So I will give the floor to each of you. I don't know who wants to speak first, Bia or Monica or Marcelo or Eugenio, to make your comments, and if someone wants to make a question, we will be free also to do that. Bia, you can have.
Hello. So just to comment that I think that it's the systematization of the consultation. It's not simple to read. If anybody wants to read the consultation itself, is even bigger and more complex. But I think that there are many interesting elements in the different axes of the consultation. Even agreeing with Monica that framing it regarding the risks. I think there are many other contributions that we can take it from it, not regarding only the risks that I think that the business models of the platforms brings, but I think that there are many other aspects of the consultation that even us at the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee haven't yet dived in. For example, the acts regarding labor rights in platforms is something that is quite present in the consultation, but we haven't yet started an intern discussion about this topic. And there are bills at the parliament or discussions in the executive branch of the federal government dealing with these topics that I think that we could try to organize ourselves, not only from the Brazilian Internet Committee perspective, but from the governments of internet community in Brazil to contribute to this process. It takes much more energy than we have. But I think that Juliano and Juliana that are organizing these meetings with the parliamentarians and also with the members of the executive of the government can tell us how receptive they are to these ideas, because when you bring some perspectives from a multi-stakeholder perspective to the debate, I think that it helps us to move forward much more focused on what we agree. And then instead of focusing on all the difference that we have, the different positions that we have, and of course it's going to be a debate, it's going to be a conflictive regulation, but I think that we need to move forward. So I'm pretty optimistic regarding the results that we had the consultation and how it can help not only our work, but the work that everybody that is really interested in having this conversation in the public sphere of at least at the Brazilian landscape, but not only at the Brazilian landscape. I think that many in the region, for example, in South America and in Latin America, are different countries that are dealing with this topic as well, are facing this debate, and I think that we can help them with the systematization of the consultation and only with the positions that we are managed to form and to establish in the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee. So it's an invitation for everybody to read, but mostly to debate and to engage in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bia. You have about 90 minutes, so I invite anyone from the speakers to talk, and also from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Henrique, and thank you for all the interventions. I found it very interesting. what you discussed here today. And in my perspective, I see that we have the platform business, but also we are facing today the platform states. I wouldn't say that it's a platform state because it's stated there are lots of several activities and responsibilities that are not platformized, but public services are going to platforms. And I think as Bia Barbosa, but the externalities of these platform models, if they are business or if they are public service, we have to take a look to preserve the individual autonomy of citizens and to preserve also public interest of the or society and our sovereignty. I think it's important. And if we had good regulation, we can provide business, the economic growth, and create safeguards. And I guess the consultation was a good mean to take a look on that. So, as we provide the LGPD or General Protection Data Law, that's for public and private, we could think about also how we regulate the platformization of states. That would be important because we as an individual looking for risks, as individual, we don't have the means to measure the risks. We have to have some support to measure the risks. We are involved in data sharing, looking on the public health perspective with the environmental problems that we face. It's important to have the production of knowledge about the risks, and I think on this regulation is what we said here, is to promote access to good internet, to significant internet, transparency, accountability, and social participation. Because even the state is not the guardian of the good interest. You have the states should be democratic, open to participation, to have a civil society oversight on the state activities. This is very important. It's not only for business that usually people claim on platforms, but also from states when are behaving as platforms. We have to have this open for social participation in a democratic governance. So these are my ideas relating to our discussion today, and thank you for the session.
So you have 6 minutes. Maybe Monica or Eugênio want to talk something?
Yes, thank you. I think we should celebrate that we are discussing these issues with the participation and engagement of all sectors of society in Brazil and beyond in a genuine multi-stakeholder exercise. And this is a consultation, a very successful one on regulation of the digital platforms. And maybe to recap what I said for the records, I mentioned digital sovereignty as an important topic, as the right of self-determination and control over your own digital future, including law enforcement and respect for court decisions based on the Constitution and national legislation at large. So I mentioned the temporary ban of the X platform, which for me was a very unfortunate incident created by a foreign company that refused to comply with Brazilian law. I don't have much to add to that, but just say that we live in a democratic country, an open society, as it was said here, where debate is free. That's why we are here. And this consultation held by the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee is a living example that democracy should and will prevail always. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eugênio. Monica.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. No, just as a final, I would like to again congratulate IGE, especially the working group on platform regulation for conducting this work. Yesterday, I was in a panel in which I had the opportunity to clear up some misconceptions about big tech. I cannot speak for all of my business peers, but I can speak for Meta. So yesterday I was able to talk about the misconception that many people have that we profit from misinformation, for instance. We don't. Our advertisers hate it when their ads are placed close to misinformation. Our users don't want to be in our platforms if they're not feeling safe. And today I feel that I have the opportunity to talk about another misconception, which is the fact that Meta doesn't want any regulation. That is not true. We have contributed. To be very honest, we didn't contribute as a company because we did not have the time to put up a contribution that would pass all the approvals necessary for us to submit on time. That's why we work through our trades. We're still a relatively small team, but we are for regulation. We want to be part of the discussions. We are seeing in real time today, nowadays, this week, last weeks, what happens when the Congress doesn't legislate and when other powers take that that task into hands. We're seeing how badly that can go. So I would like to highlight and reaffirm our commitment to continue advancing in the discussions that can lead to good regulation for not only for the business, but for civil society, for users, for Brazil. So I publicly reaffirm our commitment here in Hiki to continue these conversations back home. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. I believe we have to wrap up. It was a very good workshop, open forum, so we are glad to having all these positions. I mean, the job we've done through the working group that puts the consultation, their outcomes on the book that we are delivering today, and also for discussions that we have here that deal with very recent issues that are open, but we feel that together in a multi-stakeholder approach, we can have success on tackling of this difficult task that we have in order to have the benefits and also avoiding the risks of using technology on our lives so deeply. Thank you, everybody. And we will have the results on the website of IGF in order that we can after work on the results that I believe we have here. Thank you.